Hey, this is Senator Justin Reedy coming to you from Annapolis at the end of the fourth full week of the 2024 General Assembly session. This week was very intense, a lot of meetings, events, and legislation starting to move. The big news of the week was Governor Moore giving his second State of the State address on Wednesday. Governor Moore talked about a whole number of issues that his administration is and wants to focus on. And, there were some things that I found to agree with, and there was a number of things that I don't necessarily agree with. Generally, what's happening with Governor Moore is when he talks, when he speaks, he gives some really good aspirational things about leaving no one behind and accountability for crime, which he's started to talk more and more about, which I think is great. He's talked about competitiveness and the need for our state to become more affordable to live in. Unfortunately, when we actually get to the policies, that's where we start to have somewhat of a problem. I mentioned last week that they introduced Governor Moore and the leadership in the General Assembly on the Senate and the House put forth a juvenile crime bill that has a lot to like about it. I mentioned some things that maybe could be better, but that's actually a good thing. However, when he talks about crime, he still falls back into this idea that if enhanced criminal penalties mean some people get arrested, that if too many people get arrested, that's a bad thing. So it's sort of an odd thing that he goes into. I'm still hoping we can work together with his administration and with our Democratic colleagues to get really meaningful criminal reforms out so we can start really cracking down on crime and getting a handle on juvenile crime. But another part of the speech that I thought was fascinating is, as I mentioned, competitiveness. And he talked about Maryland being a very expensive place to live, the seventh most expensive place to live in this country, and how we needed to do better on that. But he then proceeded to talk about how everything he talked about as a solution was more government investment. He even talked about how our unemployment rate has remained very low, which is great, but everything that he talked about relative to more jobs being created or investment coming into the state was from federal government or state government investment. Well, what we really need, and I think he agrees with this, we need greater private sector job growth. We need a greater amount of free market private sector growth in our economy. And we cannot government spend our way to prosperity. That does not create, it can create jobs temporarily on government projects, but long term, for our state to really become a much more affordable place to do business, we've got to unleash the creative genius of the free market and of entrepreneurs and small businesses. We need to bring our tax rates down. We need to bring down government regulations, start to eliminate unneeded government regulations and red tape, which I'll give him credit. Governor Moore did mention an initiative they have to try to make Maryland much less cumbersome to start a business, which I totally agree with. In fact, I co-sponsored the legislation to do that. But on the tax and spending side, we have to be much more clear-eyed about what we're doing to our taxpayers, to our retirees, and to our businesses in this state. Those of us that live in Carroll County particularly know we see so many people leave Carroll County when they retire and move to places like Pennsylvania or Delaware. We see a lot of people leave and move to Pennsylvania and continue working in our county or down in the Baltimore area. So those are areas where it's great to talk about becoming more competitive, but we can't just say we want to become more competitive, so let's create some more government programs to help some people. We need to become more competitive by reducing our tax burden and the regulatory burden in the state so that people can become more affordable to live here and stay here, because that's what we want. Next week coming up, I've got some legislation that I'll be presenting in committees. One is a bill that we had a rally about yesterday, supporting parental rights, to make sure that we codify parental rights, the right for a parent, the fundamental right for a parent to direct the nurture, care, and upbringing of their child, to put that in state law. For many, many years, there's been Supreme Court rulings that have laid that out and said that is a fundamental right, but we need to put it in state law so that we can make it clear that it is. And so anything that's being proposed in the state to water down parents' rights, like recent bills that were passed a couple years ago to say that a 12-year-old can go get psychiatric counseling without their parents' knowledge or consent, those bills would run up against things like having this in our state code. And so that's a bill we're going to be pushing next week and supporting next week with a hearing. We also next week have a bill I have working actually with a liberal Democrat senator across the aisle to try to bring down costs for having a birth. Our state has made certain types of child and pregnancy-related expenses free from copay, but we didn't do that for live births, for the birth of a child. And we know that middle-class families particularly have, if they're on a type of insurance plan with a small business, for example, a lot of times you may be going to have a child and it's a multi-$1,000 expense out of pocket, even if insurance covers it. And so we know that it's best when families can have time to bond with their children, but we also know that right after a pregnancy and a birth is a very stressful economic time for families. And so if we're going to get rid of copays and deductibles for some types of pregnancy-related services, I think we should get rid of them for when people have a birth of a child, or at least try to bring that down. And so our legislation seeks to do that in some creative ways. Finally, I want to be sure to invite you, if you're watching this and you're a District 5 or Carroll County resident, we have our District 5/Carroll County night is next Monday, the 19th, February 19th, President's Day, from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Maryland Inn down here in Annapolis. We are having a free event for folks to come down to meet all of the legislators who represent District 5, as well as Senator West and Delegate Stanko, who represent the other part of Carroll County. So if you live in District 5, which includes the Frederick County portion of Mount Airy, or if you live in Carroll County aside from that, you are welcome. We do need you to RSVP to my office, though, to be sure that we know you're coming. So we hope you can make it. We look forward to seeing you, and I'll do my best to keep you updated as we move forward next week and into the real heart of the legislative session. God bless.